In the late 18th century, a tract of land along the Potomac River was designated to serve as the new capital of the fledgling United States. That decision followed years of debate between northern and southern states, aimed at placing the seat of government at a mutually acceptable location. Once the site was chosen, a French-born engineer was commissioned to design the street grid and avenue layout, plan later modified by another surveyor, after disagreements over engraving and execution. Early construction began in the 1790s. Initial structures included a rudimentary federal complex and basic infrastructure. Despite its political importance, the city remained small and underdeveloped for several decades. Life in the capital at this time was modest, sometimes described as quaint and provincial, with minimal amenities and slow-paced civic growth. In August 1814, during a war prompted by imperial rivalry, hostile forces marched into the city, meeting virtually no resistance because a hastily assembled militia withdrew before battle. The invaders set fire to major public buildings, including the presidential residence and legislative hall. The conflagration ended when a severe summer storm extinguished the flames, leaving significant damage and prompting governmental reconstruction efforts in the war's aftermath. Congress debated relocating the national capital to a different city, but ultimately voted to remain. Reconstruction included borrowing substantial funds to rebuild key structures. The Legislative Hall received a new dome. Repairs extended over a decade. A temporary legislative chamber, financed by local bankers, housed Congress while the permanent building was restored. In the mid-19th century, the capital saw minor annexation one nearby county, feeling its economic interests misaligned with municipal policies, especially regarding labor practices, petitioned to leave the federal district. That area reverted to its original state jurisdiction after legislative approval. At the same time, the city was encircled by fortifications, including a network of dozens of forts, ditches, and roads intended to protect it from external threats during a broad internal conflict. One of these fortresses was the site of a rare engagement, where the sitting head of the Republic briefly came under enemy fire. Following the conflict, centralized political oversight replaced local governance in the capital. Financial mismanagement and resentment toward a newly enfranchised population contributed to this change. A 3-member executive appointed by the federal legislature took over municipal functions. This commission would manage civic affairs. For nearly a century, toward the end of the 19th century, the city saw its first electric street transport, shifting away from horse-drawn vehicles and cable systems. Urban planning efforts extended the original city grid beyond its early boundaries, incorporating adjacent communities and unifying the streetscape. During that same period, monumental architecture was introduced. One of the most notable additions was a towering stone obelisk dedicated to the Republic's first leader. It became both a local landmark and a global example of ambitious civic engineering. At the close of the 19th century, A grand postal building rose near the avenue connecting the seat of power to its official residence. It featured a steel frame, a soaring atrium, elaborate clock tower, and integrated electric lighting and elevators. However, its design proved controversial, and its functional capacity quickly strained, leading to critiques of its aesthetics. Bend construction quality. Around the same time, ambitious urban redevelopment proposals emerged to beautify and unify the civic core, preserving significant existing structures. This included efforts to clean up congestion, improve civic presentation, and develop grand public spaces linking the legislature to a planned memorial. In the early 1900s, a Senate-appointed commission proposed reshaping the city's monumental core with open lawns, neoclassical museums along the mall, formal terraces around a prominent obelisk, and a new Union Railway terminal to replace tracks on public grounds. Though not officially adopted, pieces of the proposal were executed over decades. Memorials, a station, federal office, edifices, parkways, and bridges appeared in accordance with that vision. Union Station opened in 1907. Its grand columns and vaulted interior intended as a ceremonial entrance to the capital. The same period saw the establishment of a commission to oversee fine arts in public projects, and later the creation of a planning agency with authority to guide park and memorial construction, both to ensure future development aligned with national vision. Also, in the first decade of the 20th century, the city expanded its potable water system. A new reservoir and slow sand filtration plant were built between 1903 and 1913. These projects, part of broader civic improvement efforts, dramatically reduced waterborne illnesses like typhoid and malaria, and included landscaped walks and a memorial fountain at the reservoir site. Meanwhile, local governance remained federally appointed. A 3-member commission managed city affairs until 1967, when a presidential appointee was designated singular mayor commissioner, along with a 9-member appointed council. Self-government returned gradually. In 1973, Congress passed a Home Rule Act granting a locally elected mayor and council, subject to congressional oversight and budget approval. In 1974, residents elected neighborhood commissioners and subsequently the mayor and council in 1975. From the late 20th century onward, Washington underwent urban renewal. Efforts included significant business-backed redevelopment initiatives to counter post-war suburban decline, the creation of a civic council to spur downtown investment, and historic district preservation across neighborhoods like Georgetown, Bay, and Capitol Hill. In the late 1970s, the city elected a mayor. Before that point, mayors had been federally appointed, with the first being inaugurated in 1979. The most notable mayor later became a polarizing figure whose tenure prompted federal financial oversight amid corruption and crime, followed by rebounds in development, business incentives, urban revitalization, and downtown redevelopment. During that period, a previously little-known local politician took power. He improved city finances and launched a youth work program, but laid off police officers, causing crime to rise. By the late 1980s, allegations of graft emerged among his appointees. In early 1990, he was arrested in an FBI sting and convicted on drug charges, serving 6 months in prison. In 1991, he declined to seek re-election. He returned in 1994 and served until 1999. By 1995, the city's finances had deteriorated sharply. Deficits, junk bond status, and insolvency led Congress to establish the city's Financial Control Board, giving it authority over the mayor and council. The board functioned until September 2001, after 4 years of budget surpluses. In 1998, a reform-minded mayor was elected. His administration oversaw economic recovery, surplus budgets, urban renewal, and regained financial control, prompting the Control Board to suspend operations in 2001. In 2007, another mayor introduced development efforts, including public-private partnerships. She expanded the Anacostia waterfront program and continued downtown revitalization. Her term coincided with the opening of a new downtown arena and infrastructure investments. In the 2010s, Washington saw multiple corruption investigations. The council, mayoral staff, and contractors were implicated in bribery and contract steering. High-profile cases included concealed campaign funds tied to a mayoral race. A later mayor championed public transit and education reforms, but faced scrutiny over contract favoritism and missed federal grant deadlines. Agencies under her leadership were investigated by HUD, FBI, and DC auditors, resulting in lost federal funds, internal firings, and whistleblower lawsuits in the mid-2020s. The current administration confronted 4 separate FBI investigations tied to municipal contracting and licensing within the executive's office, resulting in criminal charges for a deputy and council member. In early 2025, Congress cut over $1 billion from the city's budget in March, prompting agency furloughs and renewed debate over congressional oversight. By Senate legislation to restore funding passed unanimously. House action stalled in February 2025. The council unanimously expelled a member accused of accepting envelopes of cash from contractors. The expelled member, a ward representative, blamed FBI targeting at public hearings. In early 2025, 4 distinct FBI probes were ongoing within the administration of Mayor Bowser, 3 leading to charges and 1 resulting in conviction. In February, it was announced that 1,500 FBI employees would be reassigned outside the DC Area 1000 dispersed nationwide, 500 to Huntsville, Alabama's part of efforts to vacate the crumbling Hoover headquarters. On July 1st, 2025, the FBI and GSA formally selected the Ronald Reagan Building downtown as the new FBI headquarters, shelving the previously planned move to Greenbelt, Maryland. Maryland officials promptly pledged to continue advocating for Greenbelt, citing the vetted site's suitability. Meanwhile, Congress slashed over $1 billion from DC's fiscal year 2025 budget in March by forcing a reversion to 2024 spending levels. The Senate quickly approved legislation to restore those funds, and President Trump endorsed it. Yet the House, led by Speaker Johnson, repeatedly delayed action, instead advancing bills targeting D.C. autonomy. By mid-May, D.C. faced a $400 million shortfall over the next 5 months, with the city warning of potential cuts to schools, public safety, and services unless Congress acted. Moody's downgraded the district from AAA to AA1, citing the uncertainty caused by federal workforce reductions and budget instability. In early July, services were impacted. The city halted operation of 6 free public restrooms under a startup pilot program after funding lapses linked to the budget cuts. Widespread backlash prompted the city council to step in and secure future funding. Native Americans inhabited the area, now known as Washington for thousands of years before European contact in the 17th century. By the mid-18th century, separate riverfront settlements existed. Georgetown East, 1751, and Alexandria, 1749. In 1790, Congress selected a site along the Potomac River as the nation's capital. In 1791, President Washington issued a proclamation initiating the L'Enfant Plan Survey and formally naming the federal district Columbia and the city Washington. Construction began soon after, including the Capitol, White House, and street grid. By 1800, Congress and other branches of government moved from Philadelphia to the partially built Capitol in Washington. A canal connected Tiber Creek and the Anacostia River by 1815. During the War of 1812, British forces captured and burned much of the city in August 1814. Prompt reconstruction followed, including reassembling government buildings. A proposal to relocate the capital was abandoned in Congress. In the 1820s-1830s, the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal expanded from Georgetown, though it never reached its intended terminus. During the Civil War, slavery was abolished in D.C. April 1862, and the city's population surged. A ring of forts was constructed to defend the capital, including a rare engagement at Fort Stevens in 1864, during which President Lincoln came under fire following Reconstruction. The Organic Act of 1871 merged the city, Georgetown, and surrounding county into a single territorial government under congressional control. Governor Shepherd modernized the city's infrastructure but bankrupted it, resulting in the 1874 shift to a 3-member appointed commission. Electric streetcars began operating in 1888, and by 1890 the city officially integrated Georgetown and extended its street grid. In 1893 to 1895, streets were renamed and unified. In 1901, the Macmillan Plan was adopted to beautify and expand the monumental core, replacing slums with parks, museums, and avenues extending L'Enfant's original design. In the 1930s, New Deal. Federal construction rapidly expanded the city's government building. In 1932, the Army forcibly removed the bonus army of veterans. The 1954 Bowling v. Sharp Supreme Court decision mandated school desegregation in D.C., implemented immediately under federal direction. By 1957, D.C. had a majority African American population due to mid-century demographic shifts. The 23rd Amendment 1961 granted D.C. 3 electoral college votes. In 1973, Congress passed the Home Rule Act, enabling the election of a local mayor and city council. The first locally elected mayor, Walter Washington, took office. The Washington Metro began service on March 27, 1976. In the late 1970s and 1990s, urban renewal and efforts to restore financial health led to growth and revitalization. Native presence preceded colonial settlement. Indigenous peoples, including the Nacoch-Tank Anacostans, Piscataway, Pamunkey, and related Algonquian-speaking tribes, lived along the Potomac and Anacostia rivers for thousands of years. The Nacoch-Tank's main village was near present-day Bowling Air Force Base, and others were around Georgetown. Archaeological evidence dates back at least 4,000 years. European contact began in the early 17th century, with explorers like Captain John Smith observing the Nacoch Tank in 1608. Disease and colonial pressures reduced their numbers significantly. Within decades, by the mid-18th century, settlements such as Georgetown, founded 1751, and Alexandria, 1749, dotted the waterfront. In 1790, Congress selected a Potomac River site for the national capital, and in 1791, President Washington commissioned L'Enfant's grid plan. Constructions began on the Capitol, presidential residence, and related infrastructure. Fast forward to 1862. Horse cars debuted in July via the Washington and Georgetown Railroad. These were soon joined by more lines, and, after consolidations, systems proliferated citywide. In 1888. Inspired by technological breakthroughs, the first electric streetcar line was introduced, the Eckington and Soldiers Home Railway. By 1889, Congress banned overhead wires downtown. Conduits and underground systems were mandated, prompting cable and electrical adoption through the 1890s. Through the 1890s and early 1900s, dozens of companies merged into larger firms, including Capital Traction and Washington Railway and Electric. By 1900, nearly 200 miles of streetcar lines served D.C. and its suburbs. Horse and cable-powered streetcars were phased out as electric trolleys became dominant. In 1933, a major merger formed the Capital Transit Company. A 1955 transit strike led to Congress mandating the replacement of streetcars with buses. The last electric trolley ran on January 28, 1962. Today, vestiges of tracks remain under historic streets and in former car barns, some preserved within Georgetown and other neighborhoods. Long before European settlement, the Potomac and Anacostia river valleys attracted indigenous peoples, Archaeological evidence shows seasonal camps near tidal creeks dating back at least 9,500 BCE, Anacostia, and over 7,000 years around the monument grounds where the mall now stands. The Nakuchtank, Anacostans, part of the Piscataway Confederacy, established villages at Anacostia and Tahoga, present-day Georgetown, trading seafood, waterfowl, and corn. European arrival, led by Captain John Smith in 1608, introduced epidemics, smallpox, cholera, measles that devastated local tribes. Villages collapsed and survivors relocated, some to what is now Theodore Roosevelt Island. By the late 17th century, many Nacotchtank had been absorbed into other tribes or displaced westward. In 1662 and 1663, early land patents were granted in present-day D.C. by settlers such as George Thompson, Thomas Gerard, and Cecil Calvert, alongside establishment of Georgetown 1751 and Alexandria 1749. As tobacco and cargo ports along the Potomac, these settlements relied heavily on river transport, mills, and slave-based trade networks. Tiber Creek, once a broad tidal stream bisecting the future downtown area, was gradually filled in the 19th century, first converted to a canal, then a seward to facilitate land reclamation and navigation improvements. Numerous artifacts from the Nakachek have been excavated during construction projects, including stone tools, pottery shards, and trade pendants discovered beneath modern Georgetown and near the capital. Hydrologically, the Potomac River, stretching roughly 380 to 400 miles from the Allegheny Mountains to the Chesapeake Bay, has been vital to the area's development, aided by its tidal nature downstream and a relatively stable flow. It supported early mills, shipping infrastructure, and even George Washington's vision for westward infrastructure, supplanting the Potomac Canal, 1785 to 1802, with the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal in 1828. Cultures along the river, including the Powhatan, Piscataway, and Nanticoke, fished, farmed, and crafted thriving societies sustained by the watershed's ecology for millennia. Evidence from archaeological surveys confirms human activity near the Potomac and Anacostia rivers dating back at least 9,500 BC. Based on stone tools and habitation, remnants found near tidal marshes south of the mall by roughly 7,000 years ago. Transitional and early woodland. Cultures had established seasonal camps in areas that would later become downtown D.C., as indicated by pottery fragments and post-hole patterns uncovered beneath the monument grounds. Linguistic and anthropological studies tie the Nacotchtank Anacostans to the broader Piscataway-speaking peoples. Their settlements such as Tahoga near Georgetown and Anacostia proper thrived on fishing, harvesting waterfowl, and cultivating maize well into the early 1600s. Contact events recorded by Captain John Smith in 1608 note towns of great plenty by on both sides of the Potomac. However, epidemic outbreaks like smallpox rapidly decimated local communities in the following decades. Archaeological digs in downtown D.C. and Georgetown have uncovered naked tank, remnants particularly chipped, stone spear points, pottery shards with shell temper, and trade bead fragments. These finds provide tangible evidence of their presence beneath streets and buildings. Centuries later, Paleoindian era, approximately 11,000 BCE stone tool. Evidence shows human groups inhabited the Potomac Valley by approximately 11,000 BCE. At the end of the Ice Age, they left behind Clovis-style projectile points and flake debris, suggesting transient big game hunting and tool projects. Early to middle Archaic period, 9,500 to 3,800 BCE. As forests expanded and ice retreated, small bands foraged along rivers and ridgelines. Sites with waste flakes, scrapers, and early projectile points indicate seasonal camps used for tool production and plant processing. Late Archaic Terminal Archaic 2,500 to 1,000 BCE excavations near present-day Alexandria uncovered Savannah River, projectile point bases, and quartzite bifus manufacturing debris. These were likely short-term camps focused on tool-making and hide processing. Woodland period 1400 BCE, add 1600 pottery, groundstone tools, for example, mortar, pestles, and fire-cracked rock reflect sedentism and early agriculture. At the river terrace site near the Anacostia, tools and ceramics show repeated use between 5,000 and 3,000 years ago. Stone tool evidence shows the earliest human activity in the Potomac region dates back to around 13,000 BCE. Point discovered in Alexandria in 2007 confirms Paleoindian presence tied to mammoth hunting. Beyond that, tool fragments and flake debris from early and middle Archaic camps, circa 8,000 to 1,000 BCE, found near marshes around what would become Washington, indicate seasonal use focused on woodworking with groundstone axes, nut processing mortar, bion spear-throwing weapons, called ATLATLS. Evidence. From approximately 3000 BCE, early woodland includes pottery, groundstone tools, bend fire-cracked rock at sites near Joint Base and Anacostia boring artifacts, showing continuity in seasonal camps along waterways between 1000 BCE and 1200 CE, woodland period. Archaeological finds in the Potomac corridor reflect greater sedentism, shell middens, wooden fencer-rounded villages, bows and arrows, and staple crops including corn, beans, squash, wild rice, and amaranth. Canoe travel is documented, as is long-distance shell wampum trade reaching the Ohio Valley. One particular burial around AD 750 near Rock Creek contained artifacts nearly identical to those in western New York, suggesting Algonquian language. Peoples migrated into the coastal plain during the Middle Woodland period. Stone tool finds indicate Paleoindian presence along the Potomac by around 13,000 BC, marked by a Clovis-style point uncovered near Hunting Creek in Alexandria in 2007. Strong evidence of Mammoth era big game activity. During the Archaic period, 8000 to 1000 BC, sites like Jones Point yielded early archaic spear points, approximately 9,000 years old, along with thousands of quartz and quartzite flakes. These tools signal seasonal camps used for woodworking, fishing, and shellfish gathering, often near marshes created by post-glacial sea level changes. Stone tool assemblages from the Middle Archaic include serrated Kirk Points and Halifax, Savannah River, and Morrow Mountain Point types, reflecting diverse hunting strategies and regional trade. In the late Archaic to early woodland transition, approximately 2500 to 1000 BCE, evidence appears of seasonal village sites with hearth structures and tool workshops, quartz tools, and firecrack. Stones point to plant processing and continued shellfish exploitation. Shifts towards sedentism emerge in the early to middle woodland, approximately 1000 BC, EAD 600. Pottery fragments soften shell-tempered and groundstone. Tools like pestles indicate early horticulture and domestic settlements near river terraces. By the middle woodland 500 BC, EAD 900, regional interaction intensified. Shell-tempered Mockley ceramics and organized trade of exotic goods appear by a D 200 to 900. Algonquian-speaking peoples likely migrated into the area then, incorporating bowls, pipes, and ceremonial structures near watercourses. Late in the woodland era, AD 900 1600. Large horticultural villages with palisades and ossuaries, for example. The Moy One site emerged near the Potomac. These communities cultivated corn, beans, squash, and tobacco, sustaining increasingly complex social organization and mortuary ritual. The earliest radiocarbon-dated human presence in the broader Potomac Valley aligns with the Paleoindian period, 13,000 BCE, supported by clover-style points and stratified artifacts in Virginia and Maryland. These dates stem from AMS assays and charcoal samples closely tied to lithic layers at major excavation sites. AMS radiocarbon dating of early and middle woodland ceramics and charcoal 500 BC, EAD 900. From central Maryland including Shelter, Mockley Wares provides precise phase demarcations. Pope's Creek to 500 BC EAD 200 and Mockley at 2,00900. These dates are backed by stratigraphy, net-impressed sands, and shell tempering transitions in pottery. Analysis of lithic raw material sourcing during the woodland era reveals frequent use of rhyolite from distant upland outcrops, alongside local quartzite and chert at Maryland sites like the Door and Loose Creek. Roughly half the tools originate from non-local sources, indicating far-reaching procurement and exchange networks. Storage pits and hearth features, dated to the Middle Woodland AD 200 to 900, are frequently encountered at village sites. These were dated using radiocarbon assays from charred game and plant remains, confirming repeated seasonal occupation and logistical settlement structures associated with semi-sedentism. Burial shafts and ossuary features from the middle Woodland period, for example. Over 40 shafts at Akaki Creek, Mockley Point, include charcoal and organic sediment samples, radiocarbon dated to calibrated a D750 to 900, alongside shell and net-impressed pottery remains. In summary, AM's radiocarbon data anchors the transition from mobile hunting groups to semi-sedentary horticultural societies. By a D200 to 900 dot ceramic typologies, Pope's Creek gives Mockley a line strongly with radiocarbon phase boundaries. Lithic sourcing shows extensive trade networks, with over 50% imported stone materials at certain woodland sites. The story ends, and if you are still here and fully awake, then you are very patient or very interested in the story. If that's the case, please leave a like and subscribe so you can hear more from me, and because they will fire me if you don't. Now, I will leave the rest of you who have fallen asleep to rest with this fire effect. Enjoy and have a nice dream.